These simple and easy biscuits have been my go-to option for breakfast lately. I always make these batches of biscuits in bulk, so I'll be putting the measurements I normally use on the right side of the screen. But if you recently knocked your noggin and are having trouble thinking straight, I'll put the measurements for a single serving in very tiny print right next to that. Making biscuits well is kind of a lot of effort compared to the other recipes I've made and tested over the years. And this one's gonna require you to put your food processor and your butter in the freezer overnight. I save my premium freezer space for meat and ice cream, so I like to make these biscuits to hold me over when I start to run low on both. Our main goal during this first step is to keep our ingredients as cold as possible. The reason we're doing this is to preserve those frozen spaghetti-like strands of butter that the food processor is spitting out right now. When these strands of butter are mixed randomly into your dough, it'll create a crispy and flaky texture in your biscuits as they bake. It also makes it really easy to tear them in half for applying butter and jam. Your butter should still be solid at this point, so mix it into the dry ingredients that we prepared before. We're still on a timer here because we don't want our butter to start melting, but try to surround each piece of butter with as much flour as you can. Clumps of butter will ruin your biscuits. Okay, dry ingredients are done. Next, we'll be adding 3 cups of this fake homemade buttermilk. I say that it's fake and homemade because this is just normal milk mixed with a tablespoon of vinegar and allowed to sit for 5 minutes. Although real buttermilk is biologically active and a superior product, we don't want to use that here, because we need the acidic vinegar to react with the small amount of baking soda that we put in our combination of dry ingredients. We've played with vinegar before on this channel, so we know that the carbon dioxide produced from this reaction is going to keep our biscuits nice and fluffy even when the dough is frozen. We just have to be careful not to over mix it, so we'll stop combining the ingredients as soon as the dough forms. We're still racing against the clock here. It's a particularly chilly 75-degree day here in Florida, and although I'm wearing my warmest and fuzziest jacket, this butter is starting to soften and melt at room temperature. And it's about to get worse since we're adding body heat to the mix. I could be anal about temperature control and press this with a sheet pan that's been in the freezer overnight. But if this recipe had any more prep involved, I probably wouldn't make it. Your dough should be pressed depending on how tall you like your biscuits. If you like them super thick with a soft bread-like center, you'll want to keep the dough thickness above 1 inch. But the trade-off for these taller biscuits is that you'll be making fewer biscuits per batch. And that's kind of unacceptable for me. So I press my dough down to about 1/2 inch, which changes the final texture of the biscuit to something a bit more crispy and flaky. We practice minimalism here on the farm, so I don't believe in paying money for a tool that does the same thing an upside-down cup will do for free. The tapered edge of the cup is gonna compact the top of your biscuit dough and change the texture just a little bit, but the taste is still gonna be the same. The extra dough left over gets rolled back up, pressed back down, and turned into more biscuits. We put so much effort into this dough that we're not gonna waste a single piece of it. To simplify this recipe, we've also chosen not to laminate our dough. Although folding and stacking our dough can make our biscuits more fluffy, we put all that work into the frozen butter, so we'll let that do the heavy lifting for the texture of these biscuits. Now we've used every last piece of dough. Next, we're going to be freezing it. And this plastic wrap will help prevent our biscuits from drying out. But it only works if you get as close to a perfect seal as you can on these, since they'll be sitting in the freezer until they're frozen solid. I normally use these gallon-sized Ziploc bags for storage, since they don't take up a lot of freezer space, and they're easy to pop out whenever I need them. This bag's going into the freezer for long-term storage, but I saved these last few to show you how I cook them. For maximum convenience, we're going to be sticking these frozen biscuit pucks into a cold oven. As the oven preheats, our dough will thaw and will basically act the same as if it was fresh made. But because a good amount of our rise is coming from a chemical reaction, and because those chemicals naturally degrade over time, the longer our dough is in the freezer, the less rise we'll achieve. So these biscuits have a freezer shelf life of about a month. And in my opinion, an egg wash is pretty much mandatory. An egg wash enhances the flavor, texture, and color of your biscuits. And since I normally eat these for breakfast, more often than not, that egg wash ends up getting thrown into an omelet. This goes into a cold oven, then we preheat to 375 degrees. Once it gets up to temperature, bake for 15 to 25 minutes. Follow the chart on your screen to narrow down specific baking times, depending on the thickness of your dough. Once you're done with the prep, these biscuits are super easy to make, and since you can cook them straight out of the freezer, you don't have to plan ahead very much either. Splitting these biscuits in half is something I always look forward to. All the pockets left behind by the melted strands of butter has given us a fluffy and moist biscuit, while the egg wash allowed us to achieve a crispy and brown crust. That's it for today on the farm. Next time we'll be using one of my favorite plants to make these biscuits even better.